You know, we tend to think of history in terms of giant things, right? Pyramids, palaces, huge monuments. But what if the greatest stories of entire civilizations, of lost ecosystems, of forgotten rituals, weren't hidden in stone, but in a single grain of soil? Today we're digging into the incredible science of micro-excavation.
And that really leads us to the central question of this whole explainer. What if everything we thought we knew about the past could be completely rewritten just by looking at the microscopic clues left behind in the dirt itself?
For generations, archaeology was basically a hunt for the big stuff you see over there on the left. You know, the grand buildings, the fancy pottery. It told the story of kings and queens. But this new field, microarchaeology, it argues that the real story isn't in the artifacts themselves, but in the very soil they were buried in. That's where you find the microscopic record of daily life, of ordinary people, and the worlds they actually lived in.
So how in the world does this work? Well, here's our game plan. First, we're going to treat soil like a hidden archive. Then we'll see how scientists can literally reconstruct ancient scenes from almost nothing. After that, we'll learn how to date a single grain of sand and then trace the invisible fingerprints of people and plants. And finally, we'll see how this microscopic view is absolutely rewriting history as we know it.
Okay, let's dive into our first section, History's Hidden Archive. The core idea here is really simple, but it's also profound. The soil isn't just dirt. It is the story.
And this quote just nails the shift in thinking. Archaeologists used to just dig through the dirt to get to the good stuff. But now they realize the dirt, the soil matrix, is the most detailed, high-resolution archive we have. It's not something in the way, it is the way.
Think of it like zooming in on history. At the macroscopic level, what you can see with your own eyes, you get the broad strokes, the general timeline. But when you zoom into the microscopic level, you start to see how a specific room was actually used day to day. And then you zoom in again to the molecular and atomic level, and that's where you can uncover what people ate and even where they came from.
So, how do they actually do it? Let's move on to our next section and see how scientists are literally reconstructing ancient scenes by, well, reading the very fabric of the past. The key technique has this really fancy name, soil micromorphology. But the idea behind it is actually pretty straightforward. You're basically looking at a slice of soil under a microscope to see how all the tiny little pieces are arranged, just like threads woven together in a piece of fabric.
And the process itself is wild. Scientists carefully cut out a solid block of dirt from a site. Then they inject it with resin, which hardens it into something like stone. Then they slice it thinner than a human hair and put it under a special microscope. What they see can literally change everything we know. And this is where the real detective work kicks in. They see a reddish or rubified layer in the soil? Boom, that's the exact spot of an ancient campfire that burned over 500 degrees Celsius. They see tiny bits of debris all facing the same direction? That's the unmistakable sign of a floor that was trampled or swept. They can even find microscopic traces of animal poop to figure out how people manage their livestock. Suddenly, an empty patch of ground becomes a living, breathing scene. Okay, so we can see what happened. But the other huge question is, when did it happen? So let's look at our next incredible tool, dating a single grain of sand using something called the OSL clock.
Optically stimulated luminescence, or OSL, is an amazing technique that can tell you the last time a single grain of sand saw the sun. The easiest way to think about it is like a tiny, natural, rechargeable battery. When the grain is out in the sun, its battery is drained to zero. The second it gets buried, it starts slowly charging up from all the natural radiation in the surrounding soil.
So, to figure out how long it's been buried, scientists do two things. First, they measure the total energy that's stored in the grain. That's like checking the battery's current charge. Then they measure the rate of background radiation at the spot where it was buried. That's the speed of the charger. You just divide the total charge by the charging speed and bingo, you get a precise calculation of how long that grain of sand has been in the dark.
But here's the real game changer. They don't just test one grain, they test hundreds of them from the same spot. This lets them spot and filter out any rogue grains that might have been mixed in by, say, a burrowing animal. By doing this, they can achieve incredible precision, often accurate to within just 5 to 10%. That's amazing.
So, we've got the what and the when. Now let's get to the really personal stuff, the who and the where. Our next section is all about how we can trace people and plants using these invisible geochemical fingerprints. This is one of my absolute favorite techniques. It's like something out of science fiction. See, every place on Earth has a unique chemical signature in its rocks.
specifically from an element called strontium. That signature moves up the food chain from the soil to the plants to the animals and to people. And when you're a child, that signature gets locked into your developing tooth enamel forever. It becomes a permanent geological passport that tells scientists exactly where you grew up.
And this doesn't just work for people. Take a look at this study of ancient barley from the Indus Valley. When scientists tested a bulk sample of grains, you can see that in the first bar on the left, they saw very little variation. Kind of boring. But when they tested single grains one by one, that's the second, much taller bar, the results were completely different. A huge range of chemical signatures popped up.
So what did that huge variation mean? It meant that these ancient farmers weren't just using one single strategy. No, they were using a complex mix of different manuring and watering techniques across different fields. It revealed a level of agricultural sophistication that was totally invisible when you just looked at the grains all lumped together.
Beyond just chemicals, the soil also holds what some scientists call a biological ghost. It's incredible. We're talking about environmental DNA left behind from skin, poop, or decomposition. There are also these microscopic plant skeletons called phytoliths, and even tiny starch granules from food that are still stuck to ancient tools. Put all those clues together, and you can resurrect a complete picture of an ecosystem that vanished thousands of years ago.
So, what does all of this add up to? In our final section, we're going to zoom back out and see how we can go from these tiny micro details to huge macro narratives, and how these discoveries are truly rewriting history from the ground up.
The impact has been absolutely massive. I mean, get this. In Denisova Cave, scientists found Neanderthal and Denisovan DNA directly in the dirt, no bones needed. In Mexico, tiny starch grains on stone tools push back the date of maize domestication to nearly 9,000 years ago. At ancient mounds in Louisiana and a Greek altar to Zeus, analyzing microscopic ash revealed the true nature of long-lost rituals. Every single one of these discoveries was a world-changer.
And this brings us right back to where we started. By looking past those grand narratives of kings and monuments, microarchaeology delivers what we call a history from below. It's a much more complete, more democratic view of the past. It focuses on the daily lives, the local realities of the farmers, the craftspeople, the families who actually built these civilizations.
Ultimately, this isn't about choosing the tiny details over the big picture. It's about connecting them. By finally putting the micro and the macro level analyses together, we can start to solve one of history's greatest puzzles: how ancient societies could be part of these vast, globally connected worlds and at the very same time live such fiercely local lives.
So we end with this one, kind of mind-blowing thought. An entire lost world, its people, its food, its beliefs, could be sitting right there in a simple handful of dust. The only question left is, what other stories are still buried, just waiting for us to look a little closer?